Today, we are met with a new Mewgenics update from Ed McMillan, the creator of Binding of Isaac, and it's a doozy. It's going over diseases, disorders, parasites, mutations, birth defects, so many different things that are going to exist within Mewgenic that is going to massively change your gameplay from game to game, from adventure to adventure, from run to run. So, we are going to be going over all of the things that have been listed in this update. There are many different things in here, all of them mostly negative when it is received or acquired by your cat, but some of them do offer some positive effects, which I think is really cool that, these things aren't just massively negative all the time. For example, the very first one he goes off is diseases, and the disease that he chooses is rabies. Rabies is a on-contact disease that his cat, for example, he tells a story about it. His cat, Rodney, got a disease from a dead body, but it wasn't actually dead yet. It was a cat that was still infected with rabies, and right before it died, it bit him and gave his own cat rabies as well. And what rabies does is it gives you a +1 strength and -1 int every time you complete combat. So every time you do an action, and then your turn is over, you'll get stronger, but your int goes down. And now the problem with that is, while you can get very, very strong, it also makes your character very, very stupid. And when your character gets stupid enough, your cat gets stupid enough, it no longer accepts any commands, and you cannot tell it what to do. It just goes and does everything on its own. It also doesn't generate any kind of mana. So he tells a story about how he and his cat Rodney got rabies. And then by the time that they got to the last boss, he was very, very strong, but he can now no longer tell his cat what to do. And the problem with that is that rabies doesn't care what's ally or what's, enemy when it comes to having 0 int. It just wants to attack. So what ended up happening in his story that he told is that, well, it attacked his mage, and now his mage has rabies. He was able to throw the really strong one next to the boss and start attacking the boss, but eventually, as time went on, while fighting the boss, other things got bit who had rabies. Other mobs of his got to 0 int, so they started attacking each other. So everyone ended up getting rabies on his team, and then they all died. And he didn't beat the boss at all, and what was left was nothing but a pile of bones. And even though it was a loss for him, it was a very memorable story. And I really like that he's telling stories about his own game and his own experience going through the game. It really gets like a really, really great feel of like every run is different and every run can end in wild ways. And these kind of games it's like a game mechanic that I really, really enjoy in these kind of like, in this genre, kind of roguelike kind of things going on. And it's great. Just random stuff just completely annihilating a run, to me, is personally really, really fun. But it's interesting to see how one of the diseases that he shows off does well. It has the foaming mouth and everything, and the graphics for it is obviously really nice. But now we are going to be jumping into the mental disorders. Now, mental disorders can be acquired from a variety of many different ways, whether it be mental trauma or passed down through dreams, seeing a ghost of your mother, or being mocked by your team by failing a basic task, are a few examples of one might gain. So many different events can cause it, many different things through breeding and DNA and going on, and the life and death cycle could have, you acquiring a mental disorder. The one that he shows off is depression, and depression gives you all stats down. He doesn't say that all of your stats go down by 2, but he does say that you get a depressive aura, which anything adjacent also becomes temporarily depressed, gaining -2 to stats. So I'm assuming that you have -2, but when you're next to everything, they all have -2. So if you got like a tanky, depressive cat, you can send them in and it debuffs all the mobs, all the enemy cats around them, or rats, or whatever it be. And now, while he might not have great stats, none of them have great stats either. And he used an example where he did this, and then he sent his other guys around and stabbed the other cats in the back, which leads to you to believe that there is positional advantages in this game. So if you're attacking someone from their back when they're facing this way, you might be doing extra damage, or it could be something like he had a rogue class, and I do believe that they have a backstab skill. So that's probably what was going on there. Hey, which I think, hey, you know, you have a really bad mental disorder, but you're using it to the advantage on your playing field. That's how you got to do it. You gotta take the low blows and figure out a way to make them high. Now, next up is physical disorders. These disorders are usually gained by physical trauma. Getting your eye pulled out from an unseen force or falling downstairs might be the cause. So either, you know, from basic events, or maybe by taking damage and getting downed in battle, you might get a permanent physical disability. A good example, he uses this chart. A physical disorder that gives your cat +4 armor, but also gives them bruise 1, which means they take +1 damage each time that they take damage. Now, I'm not sure how armor factors in to damage you're done. So if it's a temporary thing, right, you have 4 armor and it goes away after it's gone, you can take 2 additional hits before that. Like, let's say you get you have 4 armor and you have 1 attack, and then they end up doing 2 damage to you, so it takes them 2 hits to take that out. Or if armor works in a different way where it's 4, let's say they do 5 damage to you, you would normally take 1, now you're going to take 2, but you still have that extra armor. Now, I'm not sure exactly how armor works. I would have to go way back and look to see if they describe how armor is done in one of the original updates. So I went back into the stats page from one of the first updates, and I didn't see anything that really went over armor very quickly, but I might have just missed it. Yeah, even doing a search, I don't see exactly how the armor mechanic would work. But however, let's go on to the next one, which is Parasites. Parasites, there are acquired many ways through Mewgenics by joining a cat orgy or by eating a really big poop. Are really great ways to get it. They take over one of your item slots and you're unable to use set armor. The example that he uses is pinworms, so he cannot put on a neck piece of any sort. However, it also gives you the -2 constitution and -2 strength, which is pretty bad, but every time you get hit, it spawns a magnet, which I imagine because that maggot is spawned, they are going to be fighting with you. They probably do a little bit of damage with probably really low HP, I'd imagine. Probably one shot. But if you get hit a bunch of times, you're a tanky character, or you have something to protect you from damage in some way, you can spawn out a bunch of maggots yourself and then use them to be on your side. You could also probably purposely take damage by either throwing yourself into something that causes damage, or using some item on yourself that causes damage to make more of those spawn. And you can take advantage of a really bad parasite and make it halfway decent in battle. The next one, and this is ones that are pretty much purely good, and something that he didn't really mention in breeding before, that when he touched on in the last update, and is now being mentioned in this one, which goes into the biggest advantages of breeding down the line and going and doing it for over an extended period of time, and that's mutations. They are gained very rarely from breeding and strays you find in the wild, but are more commonly caused or acquired by interaction with toxic waste, radiation, or in rare case, furniture in your house. Mutations carry a random piece of your visual appearance over and changing it permanently, embedding them into the DNA forever. So as long as you continue this line of cats, they will always have that mutation. The example he uses is ram horns, which gives you +1 knockback. So that means everyone who is then bred from this will have those horns and have +1 knockback. And if you continue to get more mutations, you will continue to have that really mutated cat line, but also gives you a lot of benefits. Now, I imagine that maybe mutations are not always positive. But he does go over that mutations are the bread and butter of long play of Mewgenics. Once acquired, they are passed down, and it's amassing many buffs and modifications over time, but you need to be careful not to inbreed your cat, because you might get birth defects. So obviously you would want to keep this in your DNA no matter what, but you have to be careful because there are lines of your cats. If they are too close together, you could have something bad happen, say such as webbed toes. Web toes give you -2 speed, but it's not only just -2 speed. You get water walk, so you can move through water tiles without slowing you down. So there is some positives to having some of birth effects, but probably want to avoid them in the most part. Unless you just have so much stats, you're not worried about any stat down that you might get from a birth effect happening. But in this example, he has webbed feet. Great art. You can see it very clearly. It kind of looks like duck feet, which is exactly what webbed feet are. Birth defects are essentially mutation disorders. They have a major negative effect with a minor upside, so you could use them to your advantage if you're creative. Like I was saying, if you have a lot of stats up, and you can go for a mutation or a birth defect and have it still be relatively positive, depending on how your cat has been developing or how you've been building their line. And last but not least, we have ourselves the curses. Curses can range from magical disorders to cursed items. They can be acquired in many different ways, but are usually quite rare. Then what item he uses, or the curse that he uses to show off item, or the mechanic to show off curses in this instance, all right, let's words please, is the Child's Skull, which is a cursed item. Your attack becomes very short range and very low damage protection or projectile called Tears that you can use twice per turn. This is a cursed item, attaches to yourself to its head like a helmet, also gives you +1 armor. Again, talking about armor, probably is an overall damage reduction if it's going to be like a permanent buff, or maybe it's one that you get every round of your adventure. Still not 100% sure on that, but cursed items cannot be removed. Once you have them, that's on there, unless when you go to breed, obviously your next line isn't going to give them that hat unless you purposely put it on them because you want them to have it. Now, this is a very familiar look. It often reminds me of Isaac with the crying tear thing going on, Bible thumping on Twitch. It is a iconic look when it comes to Edmund's games. Now, he goes over to see why he's breaking down all of these different mechanic things into different updates. Where we're on like what 2 months of updates at this point, a little over 2 months, I believe, because we're going on, this is like week 10 or close, or week 8, because there's just a lot of mechanics. He has been doing these updates a little bit at a time because of, for obvious reasons, if all of this was released at once, it'd be a lot of information to take in. He is going to continue doing this. He says, much like Isaac, Mewgenics is a vast world of complex but logical interactions. Our current goal is to spoon feed all of this information to you, or all this info to you as you play and the game unfolds, as to not overwhelm the player. Each time I write a post, I get more and more excited to show you random footage. We will get there eventually, but till then, you can always get snippets of in-game content on my TikTok. I haven't personally been on his TikTok, so I probably will be looking at that very soon. I did see him talk about, I believe it was the development, how he became a developer, or his past life recently, but I definitely need to go back and watch some of those. But again, we will see another update in 2 weeks, and he says it will be going over items, and there are hundreds and hundreds of glorious items, so I can't wait to see that, because if there is all of these passives and actives, all of these other things that you can get that also affect your character, whether it be mutations or parasites or diseases or this, that, and the other, and then items on top of that, we're gonna get some pretty crazy combinations in the game, I can imagine. But anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys next time.